Hello, and welcome back to Cannabis Marketing Live, all puff, no fluff, where we the highlight leaders in marketing and cannabis in the hemp industry. So we're live every Thursday, the first and third Thursday of every month at 2 p.m. Pacific time on Facebook. So like, subscribe, follow, do all the things to be able to be notified when we have new guests. So I'm Kendra Losi, and I'm here today with Jennifer Wetzel. Did I say that right? CEO
You
and
did.
founder of Lady Jane Branding. How are you, Jennifer?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks
I
for having
Little known fact, I found Jennifer's website a long time ago because she has this awesome quiz on branding archetypes. And I'm a huge fan of storytelling, so I found it and took the quiz and was super excited about it. So it's probably been about 2 years before I was able to finally have a chance to connect with you. So I'm really excited that you're here. And today we are going to be talking about branding and all the things that go into creating a brand that will help you connect with your audience authentically in a way that's unique and also make sure it's compliant. Who doesn't want to know that?
you.
Jennifer's like, everybody,
You'd be
everybody.
surprised.
Every- yeah, when you're on the compliance, it certainly takes some of the fun out of it for
Yeah.
sure.
Sales
But
prevention.
it is, because you know what's less fun than being compliant? Getting a letter from the FCA.
Yep.
Infinitely on a scale of 0 to less fun. I feel like that's less fun.
Agreed.
All right, and if you guys are watching, be sure and drop a comment and drop a note in the comments and ask questions. We'll be going through a lot of some of the information that Jennifer's been putting together. She's a power horse and just has so much great stuff that I just love to see. So, a little bit about Jennifer is that she's the founder of Lady Jane Branding and the Women in Cannabis Study, which has amazing insights and information. So, you're definitely going to want to know more about that. And with more than 25 years marketing experience, she is now focused on helping businesses develop their unique brands that lead to deep connections with consumers utilizing a suite of data driven proprietary tools. And she's also just amazing. Like, anytime I talk to her, I learn so much. And so it's fantastic that you are here. But I'd
Thanks.
love to hear a little bit about your journey. How did you end up in the cannabis space and how did you end up creating your awesome quiz and the archetypes and all of the data that you've been pulling together for how many years now?
Just two, actually.
That's it?
Yeah, about 2.5. Yeah, when I moved to Maine in 2017 to get a new job, and the day I got here, I got my medical card. I was dealing with symptoms from a couple of immune disorders. And so I sought out cannabis on purpose to help deal with that. And then a year later, I lost that job and I dealt with a series of really difficult personal traumas and had PTSD and really was unable to go find the kind of job I wanted to do. And I thought I was going to have a hard time working for someone else. So I decided to start my own business. And I first thought I was going to, maybe make edibles, but I realized that's not my skill set. I do branding and I do branding very well. And at the time, the way the market was in Maine, um, branding really wasn't necessary. It was still caregivers who were growing for patients. There really wasn't any competition, but I saw that that was going to change. So I figured that getting into branding for cannabis was going to be, a really fun way to start my own business in an industry that is going to need branding in order to build trust with consumers who are just curious, and who need to be brought into the industry. And so I started thinking about how I was going to do that. And my goal was to simplify the process of branding for entrepreneurs and startups, because what I was seeing is that, most of them don't have that background in marketing and advertising, and that's okay. They're really great at growing or, making edibles or whatever it is. And branding is really fun. And when I used to do it at an agency, I thought about all the exercises I used to do the onboarding with clients. And I simplified those. One of my favorite things to do was to use archetypes as a tool to help companies understand how to build a brand identity. And you do that by personifying your brand. And archetypes are universal characters that you would recognize in any story, like a hero, an outlaw, a lover. And when you use characters that people intuitively understand and recognize to build your brand identity, it helps you make that connection because they get it quickly. You know, who you are, who you're trying to be, what you're trying to portray in the market. And using archetypes, it can help you even activate your brand with your employees because they will intuitively understand how to act to demonstrate your brand identity, and your brand strategy. And that's really important because consistency is one of the key things to maintain in branding. So that said, what I did to make it even more fun was I made it multiple choice and I turned it into a quiz, a personality quiz. Who doesn't love a personality quiz? Um, so I have this personality quiz. You take that quiz, and then I have an entire brand identity process built on a brand inspiration model that I created. And so the entire process of branding is multiple choice, which makes it easy. I mean, multiple choice is simple. And it helps the output of what I do is a creative brief. And so a company would take that brief to whichever creative that they need help from, you know, like building a website or a logo or a trade show booth. And that creative brief is the roadmap for your brand. Gosh, I went really deep into that introduction, didn't I?
That's okay. That's okay. I was going to ask that. I'll just take that one off my list. No problem. It's
Yeah.
great. And I want to step back for a minute because I think that you said quite a few things in there that are really important, and I want to make sure that we reiterate that. The first is creating a brand that people can relate to. One of the biggest challenges that I see, there's a couple key challenges that I see when I talk to people. And one is they feel like they want to educate somebody on a different way. Don't do that. We're all familiar with these archetypes. They're used in every single movie. They're used in every story. Keep it simple. Do not focus. We have enough in this industry to educate people on. I'm like, we have enough. um, don't try and educate them on these simple things that you can rely on, stuff that people already know.
Right.
And
Right. It's a shortcut.
absolutely.
Yep.
And we need to take them where we can.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
so what do you think the biggest strength of using the archetype is in their branding?
You know, it's a way to narrow your focus, and it's a way to help um, it, again build that consistency. So the model that I did uses the 16 archetypes. So I made 16 archetypes that are specifically for cannabis,
Yeah.
but I also have emotional themes that line up to those archetypes, and those themes, those 8 themes, help develop copy. And I have visual design categories that help develop a visual design, and they all match up to the archetype. So it's almost like Garanimals for those of us who are old enough to know that. It's mixing and matching a little bit, but once you have that identity down on paper, that's your strategy, and you're able to maintain that consistency if you stick to it.
And I love that so much and it's so true because I think it also helps identify your place, right? So I've
Yep.
seen them from a personal branding perspective, but to be able to do that for your company, I think is really important because a lot of times people have trouble figuring out where in the space they fit in. Um, Go ahead.
I'm actually going to share my screen and show you the branding model because it helps to demonstrate. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not going to let me. I needed Google Chrome. Darn it. Oh well. Um, I'm not on that. So basically, what I was going to say was these 16 archetypes provide different directions for brands to go. So when I first started in cannabis, I noticed that a lot of the brands were what I would call maybe stoner brands or doctor brands. And I thought, you know, it's going to be a really boring market if everybody goes in those 2 directions. You know, so I thought about expanding into 16 directions that would include, you know, a farmer, an activist, a rock star, a socialite, you know, all kinds of different brands that can that make up the market. And so, I've done a lot of data gathering and with the personality quiz, and it allowed me to see where the white space in the market was. There are a lot of scientist brands. There are a lot of explorer brands, but there aren't very many socialite brands or sensualist brands or rock star brands. So there's all kinds of different directions you can take a brand to differentiate yourself from the other scientists and the other stoners in the market.
I love that. So, what archetype is your brand?
It is a best friend brand.
Ooh, that's
Mhm.
a good one. I know a lot of
Yes,
those
it
as
is.
well, too. But it's interesting to me also that when you say a best friend brand, even taking that, you can really differentiate it as well. Because I've had multiple different clients that were the best friend brand in their own words without taking your quiz, but how they portrayed that is very different because we all perceive, who are your friends,
That's right.
right? And I think that's something that's really important too that you and I have talked about is making sure you know who your audience is. You
Yep.
can you can pick out any archetype in the world, but if it doesn't align with what your audience is, who they are and what they need, it's not going to matter.
Yeah, so it won't make a connection. If your audience doesn't connect with the archetype that you're portraying, you either need a different audience or you need to, have a more authentic brand that is speaking the right language to your audience.
Absolutely. And I think that's really important when you start to look at creating your brand identity and strategy. So you said in the very beginning, so first of all, the first step is a quiz. She has this
Hmm.
awesome quiz on her website, you guys. I highly recommend checking it out. It's
Lady Jane.
ladyjanebranding.com.
Hmm.
ladyjanebranding.com. Check it out. It's fun to take. She's not lying that the quizzes are fun because it also gives your brand personality. And it's the most entertaining way to do that and to help narrow it down for free that I've seen. And then, so when you take that, what's the next step? So you get your brand personality, say my brand's Explorer or whatever. What happens then? What do you recommend?
Well, right now, the next step is to go through and do the brand identity process. And I have a way for brands to do that on their own and just pay for a little bit of my time at the end. And then I also do it. Um, I can coach you through the process,
Mm-hmm.
so I take people through and I help them answer each of the questions to make sure that their brand is strong and differentiated. I'm actually building an online platform, though, so it will be fully automated soon, next year. But what the archetypes allow is that, once you know your archetype, that'll help direct and filter the choices for the additional questions. So if your archetype is an activist, when you're choosing your values and your personality and your tone of voice, we'll feed you the right words that fit an activist. I mean, of course, you can choose from any words you want, but narrowing it down to things that make sense for that kind of brand make it a lot easier to build your brand identity without you having to have gone to school to do it.
Absolutely.
So it's an easy
And
way to get everything out of your head.
absolutely. I'm a big fan of the Google Brand Sprint. It's a
Mm,
3 hour brand sprint that Google put together, or some people over at Google put together. I've used it for clients because it helps narrow down where do you want your tone. Do you want it formal or do you want it more casual, like best friend? What does that look like? Are you friendly or approachable? Friendly and approachable, or are you on an ivory pedestal, basically? So you start to get, and it's basically a slider. I mean, there's a bunch of different things with it, right? Looking at your competitors, looking at your values, looking at your mission, looking at where you're trying to go, your audience. And then you start to dial in the tone of where exactly your brand falls. Are you uh, like it really, sorry, I was trying to think of fancy cars and my brain just exploded. Are you Rolls Royce or are you a Hyundai, right? Like, where are you in terms of your pricing, your approach, your tone, and all of that comes together to create a tone, and it really does help with thinking it through,
hmm
but it also helps gain that consensus. So if you have a business with more than one person,
Yep.
You guys might take the brand quiz and end up with two, one's an activist and one's a socialite. Those are very, very different. Now, are you an
Yes.
activist? So now, and so then you have to start pulling those pieces together and finding those areas of commonality that's going to work for your audience and your brand. And I think that you have built a lot of tools that make that very simple and very effective.
I'm gonna have to check out the Google Brand Sprint because mine is a 2-hour brand makeover, so I think mine is maybe better than Google's. We'll just see.
Because Google's is 3.
Google's is 3, so I cut a whole hour off the process.
But it's really important. It's
Yes.
understanding, and that's part of it, you guys. Is figuring out what tools are going to help simplify your processes to make you more effective and into market first, right? For what you're doing, you don't want to spend 40 years trying to figure out your brand and your tone and what that's going to look like. And Jennifer and her team have put together a ton of resources. I mentioned the Google one is another option, but there's a lot that goes into it, and then there's a lot to maintain it. And
Mhm.
so one of the things that I also see people do is to create it once, like here's our brand guide, and then they never touch it again.
It should be a living document, and it should be what you use to make business decisions. If you haven't chosen defined your brand identity at the beginning of the process, then how do you know how to spend money and resources? If you're going to sponsor an event, for example, it needs to align with your archetype. If you're going to expand into new products or markets or new audiences, it needs to align with your archetype, and it helps you say no to things that don't fit. So again, it's all about consistency and remembering to do it. That's the hardest part, is remembering to be consistent.
And that guide will save you. So I used
Yes.
to I used to run all the marketing for a university, right? And that university, because it's a university, we had very clear guidelines in terms of what we could and couldn't, where we could and couldn't advertise. Plus, we had a very small budget compared to our competitors. So, in order to do that, I was constantly saying no. So, I had to create those guidelines because otherwise, people would just come at me from every campus all throughout California and Nevada. And it was crazy. Like, people came to me with advertising for signs above, like, urinals. I'm like, that's not. No, that is definitely. It wasn't on my list, but it quickly became on my list.
Yep.
So then I had the file of failed marketing ideas that people would pitch to me. Whenever I needed a laugh, I would break into that file folder of failed marketing ideas. But it's really important. Like, it's not just creating it in the beginning. It's making sure that you're living it, your employees are living it, and that it's carrying through everything that you do.
Yep.
Um, Now, we talked about that from the perspective of brand identity and strategy, as well as your archetypes, which are phenomenal. Once again, can't recommend them enough. Um, you've done a lot with. Now, I want to take it from the fun quiz that makes it really simple and fun to compliance.
Mm.
Oh, compliance. But it's really important, and we have to be compliant on everything we're doing, right? If we're on social media, there's different rules there, but the biggest overarching compliance that we need to make sure we're doing is the FDA.
Yep. Yep. So I have a bit of a background in animal health, which follows the same rules for labeling health claims as cannabis needs to, and CBD. So I have actually developed an online course to teach people how to write claims and messaging that is FDA compliant, and it uses this brand model. So I've outlined, all the words you can't use, all the things that are red flags, what a health claim looks like, how to avoid those, what the penalties are, and I've also put in there how to write messaging that focuses on features and benefits, which in most marketing we try and go above features and benefits, but right now, while we're trying to teach people how to use cannabis, these cannabis curious consumers, um, talking about features and benefits teaches them how to appreciate it and how to understand quality. So I think that's important in this market. But then I use that model of those 8 messaging themes, which are action, introspection, guidance, experience, innovation, um, guidance, status, enjoyment. I think I got them all. So once you know your theme, then you use the that model to help make sure that your messaging is on target. You use that for inspiration to make sure that if you're an activist, that your copy is all about action and exploring and being an activist rather than an eternal child, or a rock star. Like that messaging just wouldn't fit. So it's both teaching new ways to talk about cannabis and CBD without relying on selling hope, which is what you're doing when you're making a health claim. People, you tell people that it's going to cure something or make them feel better, and if they don't, they're not going to buy your product again. But if you convince them that it will make them joyful or active, something that is not a health claim, at least maybe there's a placebo effect, and people will enjoy it and they will come back.
Is there what would you say is the most common mistake that you see people making with their marketing, with their messaging when it comes to compliance? Is there just like one thing?
Well, I would say, there are a number of words that are you just should never use. And I see those words all the time. And I especially see them in product names. Like you can't put RX on your product name. I see it all the time. I see it all the time. One of the other things, okay, so here's a common one that is easy. Don't use a supplement facts panel on your CBD and cannabis products because they are not supplements and cannot by law be supplements. So if you say this is a supplement, you're telling the FDA that you're breaking the law. You're making it worse for yourself. And that's what the letters say, pretty much. So avoid that. Take that off your package.
And isn't there something, and I should know this, I was just looking at this the other day, where if you, depending on how you say you're going to take it, like the method of consumption makes a difference too as to whether or not it becomes a supplement.
It can, but it still can't be a supplement. It
right,
can't ever
which is
be a
what,
supplement.
right. So if you're describing how to take it in this
Right.
way, that it becomes something about it makes it become a supplement.
Yep.
So it is really important, you guys,
Yep.
to make sure that the claims are not there. It's amazing how many websites I look at and people are like, oh, this will relieve all of your arthritis. Really? No. Really? That's the word you chose to use?
Yeah, honestly, any disease name at all is non-compliant. Any disease name. So if you've got that on your website, that's an automatic non-compliance.
What about, and I'm just playing devil's advocate right now. So if I'm saying that, so say I have a CBD brand and I see this a lot, it will, I'm naming it sleep because that's what it's going to do, is help you sleep. That is not compliant.
That's a tricky one, and it depends on the ingredients, and it depends on what else you say. Insomnia is a definite no. If you have to write a claim that makes it a normal everyday thing. So if it helps with occasional sleeplessness, maybe. If it's to cure your insomnia, no, absolutely not. It just depends on context and the words you use.
And I think all of this is just so important because, like I said, it's rare that I see websites that have these comments in them. They haven't either taken the time to pull a lawyer in, and I know that those of you guys that are doing that level, it's paying off for you because you're not getting those letters from the FDA or complaints from people. But when you set the expectations, to your point, that this is going to absolutely 100% cure insomnia, nothing's going to do that for sure. Right?
Not for everyone.
Right. Mm-hmm. For every single person that tries it. So don't set the expectations so high that no product's ever going to fulfill them.
Yep.
I mean, short of it being, Benadryl taking, knocking you out or whatever, even that, it works differently for everybody. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I've seen people do to get around this is use that in the testimonials. So this person said that it helps you sleep.
Nope.
So you guys listening, pay attention to this. It's really important. And if you have it in there, don't do it.
If it is on your website, it is your marketing, regardless of who said it. So the testimonials need to be scrubbed too.
And that's really important because there's a lot of review sites that people just have connected to their website. So if you're pulling in reviews and not really looking at them, make
Dangerous.
sure you do that. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because they could easily be negative reviews. Not that anyone watching those products would have negative reviews, but you want to make sure that you're doing that, that you're keeping track and keeping them clean. And that goes through to your marketing messaging too. If you're repeating customers' claims, that becomes your claim.
Yep.
Yep, yep. Okay, I don't want to end on negative compliance. Don't do this.
You want to talk about data?
I do want to talk about data. Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about data. So, I'm a bit of a data nerd, so we've been doing a lot of data collecting lately. The Women in Cannabis study has been complete. We are still analyzing and reporting, and there will be a book. Um, and we have also almost wrapped up a survey of 10,000 current and curious consumers in 14 states. And we have information on their cannabis usage and frequency and what they use cannabis for, the types of products that they prefer, like whether they prefer to smoke or use edibles, the types of edibles they're interested in. Just very in-depth profiles of the current cannabis user and the canna curious user, or the canna curious, in legal states. And we're going to be putting that out soon. And the information is amazing and really revealing. We even asked things about interest in psychedelics, which definitely current cannabis consumers are significantly more interested in learning more about psychedelics than those who are just curious about cannabis. So lots of insights coming from Lady Jane soon.
It's exciting. And do you have an estimated time frame on those? I love
Well,
that.
we're just soon, like next month or so.
Okay.
I've got the first report done, and I think we did the first one for Massachusetts and Maine, the first two. So I could see the differences between the states that I'm closest to. So we need to finish the rest of those states, and then take a look at how it all looks. One of the early insights, we're looking at the percentage of each state that is kind of curious, to look at the potential in that market. And the top two markets for percentage of kind of curious of the market were Michigan and Oklahoma. So
I think
yes.
based on this week, I've got a whole list of other states I'd like to send them to, send some cannabis to. Based on a couple maps I've been watching.
Yep.
I don't want to slow down the counting, but I would like to send some
Yep.
cannabis. But one of the things I think that is really important with your data, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started the show, is with the 5 states that came on board this week with the elections, there's a ton of data and information available for people who are just starting out in a state that's brand new. Just from all of the work that's been done by people like Jennifer over these past few years. So, you guys, if you're starting out, there's a ton of resources, and keep an eye on what Lady Jane Branding is going to be releasing, because the studies are fantastic. I mean,
We also do custom research. So if you have questions now, we can put together a report for anyone who needs one. But we just don't have them ready for sale for everyone yet, but they will be.
it's exciting. It's really exciting. And everything that you guys are offering, like knowing your love of data, I personally love just how it's not just somebody pulling this stuff together and being like, here's what I think, magic wand down. Like, it's actually based on data, it's based on information, and it's based on what people are doing and the behavior people have. Not just
Yep.
what they're saying, it's what their behavior is too.
Yeah. Everything we do, I try to make sure that everything we do is data driven, or at least, well, some of it's a little art driven rather than science. But that data gives all of the information that we put together a lot more validity. And, the other thing that we're really trying to make sure to do is make all of the data and insights that we put out um, very easy to digest. I'm very much about a simple visual display of information, so that you can take one look and understand the story, rather than just here's a bunch of numbers, good luck. Because it's hard to activate research, if you don't, if you can't see the story, you know.
Absolutely. I think that's something that I've really appreciated. I think I mentioned this too, the Oasis Intelligence study, just in terms of from the impact of video and how important that is for marketing. Like, I took that whole study and I took those like 3 bullet points about how people are learning and how people are being, are talking about the best way to reach them. And knowing that is one piece. The how to reach them is great. That's nice. But what are we saying? What are they caring about? It's that next level that needs to come after that. And that's the information that you are pulling together right now that we cannot wait to get our hands on.
Yep. And so right now it's by state, but what we are working on is doing it by archetype. So we will have archetype personas, of industry insiders from the Women in Cannabis study, of current consumers in 14 states, and from Canna Curious in 14 states. So we'll be able to look at those archetypes from 3 different stages of their cannabis use. New people who aren't doing it yet, everyday users, and then those who are so committed they work here.
Love it. I love it. All right, you guys, ladyjanebranding.com is where you want to go to check it out. Jennifer, before we go, you ready for the speed round?
Ready.
All right, let's see here. Time for the speed round. Musical effects. Takes so little to make me happy some days. Okay, so question number 1. Are you ready?
Yep.
What is your favorite cannabis or hemp CBD product?
Well, it's actually a device, and it's the Genius Pipe. I love it so much. I have one every day. I have a new one every day.
Oh, I haven't heard of this.
It's brilliant. I wish I had one for show and tell handy, but I don't. It's a little metal pipe, and it's held together with magnets, and on the inside are dimples that cool the smoke as you draw it through. So it's a very clean and cool draw, and it's unbelievably easy to clean. It's portable. I love it. It's just the right dose. My favorite.
Ooh, that's good to know. Genius Pipe. Okay, cool. I'll check it out. Thank you. Number 2, what is your favorite resource, whether it's a book, video, podcast, anything along those lines, that you would recommend to people watching?
Well, I do actually have a prop here, and it's this book, The Medicalization of Marijuana by Michelle Newhart. And I'll tell you, it's a little bit textbook, but the information about the experience of becoming a medical cannabis patient, and how cannabis is becoming medicalized, and it's very in depth and very well written. And when it talks about stigma and having to navigate that to become a patient, and to try and avoid what the stereotypical stoner. It's amazing background. If you work in the industry, I highly recommend it, just to know the history too.
I love it. Can you hold it up one more time?
Yes.
The medicalization of marijuana. I have already added it to my list. Thank you for that recommendation. Okay, ready? Last question. This one's really important. How can people connect with you?
LadyJaneBranding.com, at LadyJaneBranding on Instagram. WomenInCannabis.study is the website for that information. Just connect with me on the website is the best way to reach me.
Awesome, you guys. And like I said, I cannot recommend the archetype quiz enough. It's just filled with fantastic insights and information. And if you're feeling stuck on how to define your brand or how to move your brand to the next level, just check it out. check it out. It's
Or
fun.
yeah, or if you're having trouble with your current freelancer or agency because you're not connecting well. I have a lot of clients who are having communication issues because they haven't communicated their brand properly to a creative, and they're just not getting the work that they want. So I can help facilitate that discussion if you need it.
Thank you. That's actually really important. Yes, I've seen several people lately with that exact problem that can't figure out how to get the brand defined to turn into a logo and a visual look.
Yep.
They're just feeling stuck, and it's hard to watch.
That's my sweet spot. Get in touch.
Fantastic. All right, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time. Those of you guys watching, I really appreciate you being here. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I'm like, how is it already November? I don't know. I was saying November in September. Kept saying that November was next week in September, and now we're here, and I'm like, wait, it's still July, right?
Yeah, time is weird right now.
Time is super weird right now. So we'll be back in 2 weeks on the third Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. We will talk to you guys later. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here, and have a great rest of your day, you guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.